Today we are going to be going through two artworks and we are going to be discussing the differences between the neoclassical period as well as the romantic period in art. Okay, so first, what are the characteristics of the neoclassic period? So neoclassicism is characterized by three main things, right? These are the main elements. This is going to be order, accuracy, and structure. What these do is they allow us to make clarity of the form, sober colors, shallow space, as well as the strong horizontal and vertical lines. This is going to be something very important in neoclassical art. Lots of lines, very ordered, very structured, so remember that. Okay, so the movement is based on the art of the Greek and Roman antiquity, right? So this involves things like harmony, clarity, restraint, and idealism, right? Not necessarily showing reality, but an idealized version of it, very noble, right? Moving on. So in contrast, what does the romantic period have, right? So this is going to be based on emotions, individualism, imagination, and nature, right? So there's a bit of a difference from the neoclassical period. How? So we see that in the romantic period, there's more a focus on the nature. It's very emotional, while the neoclassical period was less emotional, more idealistic, right? Both are idealistic, but the romantic period puts higher focus on emotion, being an individual, and basically creativity of the person, while the neoclassical period was more about copying the Greek and Roman antiquity and being seen as more noble, very classy, right? So the Romantics rejected the ideas of rationalism and order of the Enlightenment period, which we'll be covering very soon, and instead celebrated unpredictability and subjectivity, right? There is a large focus on spirituality as well, and not only that, but imagination, mystery, fervor. This is the feelings of great warmth and intensity, right? These are what they celebrated. Okay, so now, what preceded the Romantic period? Well, as I said earlier, this is going to be the Enlightenment period, right? So what is this? So the Enlightenment period is an age of enlightenment in which a European intellectual, so it was a European intellectual movement of the 17th and 18th centuries in which ideas concerning God, reason, nature, and humanity have been synthesized into a worldview that gained wide assent in the West and investigated revolutionary developments in art, philosophy, and politics. Cool. So, now, let's go through analyzing our neoclassical artworks. So, over here, you will be seeing The Death of Marat. This is a 1993 painting by Jacques-Louis, and it depicts an artist's friend, a murdered French revolutionary leader, Paul Delaroche. And through this analysis, we're going to be seeing how the neoclassical period tried to paint Marat as almost a martyr, as opposed to someone who was writing political propaganda, right? So the neoclassical period was widely known for their use of propaganda or high romanticization of an event in order to make it so that it seemed more idealistic and romantic, ironically, in nature. Cool. So, you'll see that the arrows on these slides point to different things, right? So the first arrow points to the letter from Charlotte Corday. This is the woman who murdered him, right? The next is the wound, which is at the base of the collarbone, right? And then our eye is also drawn down to the knife. So how is this done, right? So let's start analyzing this artwork now that we've just looked at what's important in the scene. So the title. This refers to the murder of the French revolutionary leader Jean-Paul Marat, who was murdered by Charlotte Corday while he was lying in a bathtub of vinegar, which he had to lie in order to, kind of soothe his very painful disease of the skin, which meant he had to lie in a bath of vinegar all the time to just ease the pain a bit, right? So, he was murdered by Charlotte Corday while he was sitting lying in the bathtub. Many artists made use of this motif, right? Marat being treated as a hero, while Corday is regarded as a traitor, despite this murder only being prompted by her revulsion at the September massacres, for which she held Marat responsible. Important note is that these massacres also threatened civil war, right? Okay. So when looking at this piece, we can see the light in the painting comes from above Marat, right? This allows us to see Marat as a victim, as it kind of puts the light, it makes him seem more innocent, right? When light comes from above, we kind of associate it with a heavenly light, right? Almost giving us the idea that he has done no wrong and he should be treated as a victim. More than this, the light forces our eye from the corner of the painting where it is situated down towards his Marat's face, down his arm, then back down Marat's other arm to his pen and the knife, right? So we kind of go around the details, right? So the light first takes us to his face. We see the agony, the very sympathetic expression he's holding. And we want to feel sympathetic to him. We want to say, oh, shame. Look at that pathetic guy. And then the light draws us down his first arm, which would be the left arm, I think, to the letter, right? So pointing out that detail. The light is then drawn to the other arm, in which we go down. We see the pen in his hand, showing us that he was a writer, as well as seeing the knife which kills him, lying on the floor. Cool. So this paints the story of why his death happened. It shows us that he was a revolutionary leader taking control of the revolution through his writing, and that is what got him killed, right? We follow the order of events through the order we look at things in the painting. So, similar to the way light was used, implied line is used to guide the eye of the viewer towards Marat. The position of Marat's body and the direction of his arms, the angle of his gaze, all create a sense of movement that lead the eye towards him. When we look at the way the painting is structured, we see that the bulk of the painting is in the bottom half, right? This furthers the idea of Marat's martyrdom. He may be the subject, but he takes up very little space, making him feel small, somewhat pathetic, some would say. This makes us feel more sorry for him, and this idea of martyrdom is then furthered when looking at the colours adorning Marat. The white cloth he wears and surrounds himself with gives us the idea of innocence that further makes him stand out in contrast to the dark greens and browns that surround him. Right? Take note again that these dark colours were very common during the Neoclassical period, right? They used a lot of dark colour. Okay, so now this is related to its movement in the form of its use of line, colour, etc., but most importantly, we look at the statue-like way Marat lies in the bathtub. It's idealized. If you've just been killed, you're likely not going to be sitting there in your little model pose, serving, right? But Marat is, because it's an idealized view of him. It takes inspiration from Greek statues. Cool, very calm, collected, serene. Right. But now into our analysis of our romantic artwork, and later we can compare the two. So, over here you will be seeing the execution of Lady Jane Grey. So, this is a 1833 painting by Paul Delaroche. The painting portrays Lady Jane Grey, known as the 9-Day Queen, due to her being proclaimed Queen of England, only to be executed 9 days later after being charged with high treason. So, analysis of the artwork. When we look at this painting, we see that around Lady Jane, a triangle forms from the base of her dress to the end of her head. What this does is heighten the emotion of the scene. This emotion being key to the Romantic period, right? We see her as quite stable and collected, even though she's being executed, right? This is further emphasized by the triangular shape, as well as making it more dramatic as a triangle. It's not as stable as a square might be. However, the base is stable, but it gets weaker, right? This is kind of symbolic of the fact that she is blinded in this painting. She cannot see, so she is weak, right? She may be touching the floor, right? But she cannot see, she is blind, she is weak and victimized, right? So now analysis of the artwork for the movie, right? So behind Lady Jane stand her ladies in waiting. They hold onto her dress as they cry. The way they are posed makes sure to expose their neck. Now what this is a grisly reminder of what is to happen to Lady Jane Grey. She's about to be beheaded, right? So, now further. So here you will be seeing that the eyes also focus on Lady Jane Grey's face, right? So the executioner, the priest, and then furthermore, like the neck, and at the back and the nape of the neck, pointing towards Lady Jane Grey. So, executioner's line of sight directly towards Jane, her lady in waiting back points towards Jane, and the executioner's block is also pointing toward her face, right? All of these things work together to draw our attention to Lady Jane, who is the focal point of the piece, right? She is front and center, and the piece makes sure we see that. Now, how else is our eye drawn to Lady Jane? This is through color. She is wearing her white petticoat, and while her ladies-in-waiting nurse her old dress, the white petticoat draws our eye to Jane. It forces contrast between her and the dark background and the deep reds. White is also symbolically used. It's representative of innocence, possibly telling us the artist's feelings towards execution, saying that Lady Jane is not an evil person, she did not commit treason, but rather we should see her as a martyr and a victim. So, when we look at this piece in relation to its movement, the Romantic period, we see that the piece is emotionally charged, and despite the surface level not having any nods to nature, the execution actually takes place outside despite the dark background that may tell you differently, right? The lack of living plants furthers the somber mood and heightens the emotion, thus playing into the ideals of the Romantic period. Cool. So, now that we've gotten to the end of the analysis part, we can compare the two, right? We see that in both pieces, the art is still dark, very somber, these pieces, however, they are still characterizing their movements. Marat is, in fact, posed in a very statue-like way. You see that he looks very unscarred for someone who had a debilitating skin disease. We see that it's highly romanticized, not in the sense that it's emotionally charged like the Romantic period, but no one dies that way. They would look more dramatic, they would look different, right? But we see that because of the Neoclassical period and its ideal of beauty and statue-like posing, Marat is posed in the same way, and he looks the same way. They get rid of his scarring, and the fact that he is pretty, inverted commas, because beauty standards stupid and such, allows us to kind of sympathize with him more. If he looked monstrous or scarred or debilitated by this like skin disease, we would say, oh, whoa, dude. But what the artist does is they make him look more beautiful, and they make him fit into the ideals of the time in order to make us feel more sympathy towards it, right? Kind of taking charge of society, saying, look, this is a martyr, and ignoring the realities of the situation. It's highly idealized. Similarly, the execution of Lady Jane Grey paints her as this innocent martyr, right? Which we don't really know if this was the case, right? That's, your decision to make after researching. But right, through its use of color, through the high emotion and the tension we feel in the piece, through its use of line in both paintings, right? Emotion is shown, right? So we look at these colors, we look at the different things used, and we said that while they both fit into their different movements, they can fit together as well because they have very similar nods to nature, very similar nods to color. They show the characters, they show the people, the subjects in the same way. By both, we see that the color is similar, however, it is the emotion and the plant, natural subtext in the execution of Lady Jane Grey that separates the two pieces, right? So that is what changes them. Cool. So, going back to the different parts, we see that, going back to linking them to their movements, we see that the execution, the Death of Marat fits in with the order, accuracy, and structure points we mentioned earlier, right? It makes use of the different clarity and the sober colors, shallow space, as well as strong horizontal lines. Right? We discussed how the lines lead us towards him and they create the space, right? This use of shallow space as well is used because the space behind him doesn't seem very 3D, right? While in Lady Jane Grey's piece, you can almost feel that there is more space behind her, right? It feels empty and sad and cold. While in Marat's case, it's more claustrophobic because the back lacks detail. It is just a brown wall, right? It serves to show this. It serves to be simple so that we can focus on Marat, right? And in the Romantic piece, we see the high use of emotion, right? We see this imagination, right? Because the execution likely wouldn't have actually happened this way. It's creative license taken to make us feel more sympathetic towards Lady Jane, right? We also see a link to nature as well. But we see this through the use of the dead hay that she is sitting on, right? The fact that she is outside, but the fact that everything seems so somber, it all adds to the mood, right? It heightens emotion and makes us feel more sympathetic. It shows us this is a dark day. Thank you.